Man, how long have I been playing? Probably a while. What time is it? Peter!
Huh?
It's time to film the show.
Oh gosh.
Let's go.
I swear it doesn't normally take me this long to make videos, but I've kept you all waiting for this one long enough. It's been a long time coming, definitely. But what do you say we finally play some Vectorman?
Get that out. We gotta do the first game first.
It's time for more retro Sega games here on Retro Rampage, and this time we're looking at a series that I've been playing on and off for over 10 years, Vectorman. These games never seem to get the praise that they deserved, and I could never figure out why. So suit up and grab your 3 or 6 button controllers, because I'm diving headfirst into both games in the Vectorman series. Picture this, it's November 1995. The Sega Saturn has been out for about 6 months, and the original PlayStation released about 2 months ago. But here comes this new IP from Sega called Vectorman for the Sega Genesis. It does make sense to make a new game for the console more people are likely to own, but the problem is that everyone was already focused on the Saturn and especially the PlayStation. No, the reason Vectorman was made for the Genesis is because of another game that came out the previous year, Nintendo and Rare's Donkey Kong Country. The pre-rendered graphics of Donkey Kong Country blew everyone's minds when the game came out, and seeing a game like this run on a Super Nintendo with no enhancements made a fool out of Sega, which had been releasing expensive add-ons like the Sega CD and 32X to try and squeeze more power out of the Genesis. Sega pretty much looked at Donkey Kong Country and said, hey, we can do pre-rendered graphics too, and that's how Vectorman came to be. Development was handled by Blue Sky Software, a studio extremely familiar with the specs of the Genesis. They made a bunch of games for the system, including 2 Jurassic Park games, which are some of my favorites. With the goal being to push the Genesis to its limits graphically, Vectorman was released in November 1995. Better late than never, I guess. Even if the graphics were mind-blowing at the time, it won't mean much if the game itself isn't fun. Still though, just judging from the box art here, it's pretty obvious that Sega was still obsessed at this point with giving characters attitude. I actually think this box art looks pretty cool, except for this weird helmet thing they put on Vectorman. He doesn't wear that in the actual game, but you could tell Sega wanted this to look like something special. Not only is the box metallic, but he's actually pushing the Genesis letters out of the way. I personally was sold on the box art alone, but box art isn't everything, so let's jump in and see what's in store for us with Vectorman. Well, graphics is right. Just look at this title screen. It's all in your face with the bright colors and scaling sprites that flash a lot. And let's just get this out of the way now, there are a lot of bright flashes in this game. So even if you're the slightest bit epileptic, you'll probably want to stay far away from this game and click off this video right now. Just a warning. Vectorman takes place in the not-so-distant future of 2049, where humanity has fled into space after heavily polluting the Earth. They leave an army of Orbots to clean up the mess, named as such since their entire bodies are made up of nothing but orbs. One leading Orbot, Raster, watches the whole operation through a worldwide computer network, but things go south fast when Raster accidentally gets a nuclear bomb attached to his head. How do you even begin to screw that up? We're never shown in-game what Raster's original head looks like, but I can assure you it's not going to look anything like a live nuclear explosive. Well, ridiculousness aside, Raster goes insane and renames himself Warhead. Through the computer network, he hypnotizes the Orbots into following his orders to convert the Earth into a weapon of destruction to ambush the humans when they return. Meanwhile, Vectorman, who's pretty much a garbage man in this universe, is unaffected by the mind control since he was the only Orbot not on Earth at the time of Warhead's takeover. With nobody else to rely on, Vectorman makes it his mission to stop Warhead before the humans return. Vectorman is a 2D platformer with an emphasis on shooting. One look at the gameplay will tell you everything you need to know about what kind of game this is. The best way I can describe it is a slightly faster Mega Man with a bit of Contra thrown in. Vectorman can shoot in all 8 directions, which is excellent for taking out enemies in awkward locations, but he also has a double jump that gets you a good amount of extra height. This double jump also doubles as an attack. If you time your jump right, you can hit enemies with the flames that come out of Vectorman's feet. This attack is awesome when timed right, as it does way more damage than your basic hand shots, and you can do it as many times as you want as long as there's a place for you to land. You can also fire straight down in the air, and the recoil will actually slow your descent. It's a good way to drop into areas where there might be enemies waiting. Vectorman can also find power-ups located inside TV monitors. What was with Sega in the 90s and their obsession with destroying TVs? Sonic did it, and now Vectorman is doing it too. Maybe we have these guys to blame for why CRTs are so hard to find now.
Just keep Vectorman away from my TV, okay?
Vectorman at least has an excuse to destroy the monitors, as it's because of them that the mind control signal was broadcast. Inside these monitors, you can find a checkpoint marker, some health, a permanent health expansion, or a weapon power-up. The default straight shot is okay enough, but if you explore the levels well, you'll find weapons like a Contra-style spread shot, a machine gun, and my personal favorite, the bolo. Yeah, it looks kinda goofy, but it packs a punch and can even take down bosses with ease, so grab it whenever you see one. The weapon you'll see the least is the Overkill Bomb, a screen-clearing blast that I won't even show here because it makes the screen flash so badly. Definitely look away from this one if you have sensitive eyes. There's one more type of item Vectorman can find when destroying a TV, and that's the transformation. Being made entirely of orbs, Vectorman can morph his body into different shapes, allowing him to access different parts of the levels. These transformations include a drill that can pierce through floors, a car that can break through walls, and even a bomb that destroys both terrain and enemies. I have no idea how Vectorman can survive repeatedly exploding, but there's no denying it's an effective way to deal with enemies. There are also transformations that allow for greater maneuverability, like a fish transformation for underwater areas, and another one that straight up allows you to fly for a short time. So with all these weapons and transformations, Vectorman sounds like a pretty versatile Orbot to control, and you'd be right about that, but you're gonna need all the power-ups you can find to get through this game because Vectorman 1 is hard. Not impossible, but the challenge this game presents might drive away more casual players. Each level is referred to as a different day in Vectorman's journey to track down Warhead, and these levels are decently big for a Genesis game, presenting you with multiple paths to take on your way to the end. Over the course of the game, Vectorman will travel through all sorts of locations on his way to find Warhead. These include futuristic airports, a frozen glacier, an abandoned bamboo mill, derelict ruins, a creepy laboratory, and the World Link Center where Warhead is located. The developers obviously wanted players to explore these levels and find as many items as possible, but you have to make sure to keep moving because there's a time limit, and if you don't hurry, you can and will run out of time, which can be frustrating. Exploration is only part of the deal, as all the brainwashed Orbots you'll find in these levels want nothing more than to see Vectorman explode into a pile of orbs. Hope you've played Mega Man or Contra, because you'll need a fast trigger finger to kill these guys.
Or a Mega Fire controller. Jeez.
Most enemies aren't too much trouble to take down from a distance, but the one enemy type that never fails to screw me over is the stupid mosquitoes. These guys always appear in the worst locations, and they never seem to stop spawning in. Even worse, you might think you've cleared them out, only to jump and have one smack you right in the face. I hate these mosquitoes with every fiber of my being, and guess what? They're some of the most common enemies in the game, so if you see one, get ready because there's probably 50 more right behind it. The worst offender here is the underground vault. The mosquitoes are out in force here, and they will ruin at least a few of your jumps. Some of the levels have boss fights at the end, and these are pretty fun. The fight with the sludge barge isn't anything special, but I do like the fight with the Aurora Borealis as it shapeshifts into different animals. The fight against Clockwork in the bamboo mill can be infuriating if you don't keep your distance because of the projectiles he releases when you shoot his head. The 3 robots at the end of the underground vault aren't too difficult, except for the piranha who won't stop running back and forth faster than the screen can scroll.
Monkey!
And I've always been impressed by the animation of these guys in the hydroponic lab. Although the fight itself is pretty easy, you just have to keep your distance and keep shooting at them, and they'll be dead in no time. The final fight with Warhead is tricky since you don't have a lot of solid ground to stand on. However, these are not the only bosses you'll be fighting. Every few levels, you'll find yourself in a boss fight with a different form of Warhead, and these I can take or leave. You're supposed to watch Warhead's attacks and counter by shooting his weak points, but the uncapped rate of fire means 9 times out of 10, I just position myself right in front of where I'm supposed to shoot and fire like a madman, hoping I kill him before he kills me. Some of these levels are creative from a design perspective, but they're over so fast that they don't leave much of an impact on the game as a whole. The main thing we have to address here are the graphics. This game was developed as a direct response to Donkey Kong Country, and man is it obvious, and I mean that in the best way. The pre-rendered graphics are some of the most impressive on the Genesis, and the game is full of all kinds of lighting effects, such as how the shading on Vectorman changes depending on which way he fires. The lighting effects aren't just limited to Vectorman's shots either. Levels will have sprites moving through spotlights, levels taking place at sunset, and even one really impressive lightning effect that I just can't get enough of in the nightscape stage. Levels are colorful and character animations are impressively smooth, but as I'm sure you've noticed by now, the game is pretty guilty of copy and paste. Vectorman travels through the same looking Terraport area 4 separate times, and although each of those levels takes place at a different time of day, it does come off as a cheap way of extending the game and it feels like Vectorman is traveling in circles. While you're exploring the levels, you might come across this satellite that you can't damage no matter how hard you try. You have to find and destroy a generator, then come back to the satellite and destroy it. Do this and you not only get to play a bonus game, but it skips you to the next level, so seek out these satellites if you're in a hurry. Now make no mistake, Vectorman is an excellent game, but it's not perfect. Although I praised the transformations earlier, they do feel a bit too situational at points. When you touch a transformation icon, Vectorman will transform right then and there, and you only have a short amount of time to find the breakable surface before the transformation wears off. Imagine if we could save these transformations instead of using them immediately. Leave it up to the player to decide when to transform, and that could open the door to some extremely creative level design, with even more hidden areas to find. The game as is still pretty good in this regard, but I feel it could have been handled a bit better. Despite the abundance of weapons and transformations, I feel they just don't show up enough. You're encouraged to really explore the levels in order to find these items, but the existence of the time limit means more often than not, you're hurrying to get to the end before time runs out. So even though there are multiple weapons in the game, most of the time is probably going to be nothing but I touched on the difficulty a bit earlier, and this is a challenging game, but certain aspects of it feel a bit too challenging. Vectorman has no continues of any kind. You can earn extra lives, but once you run out, that's it. You're starting from the beginning. There is a cheat code to start at later levels, but if you do that, it locks you out from seeing the real ending, so bring your A game. You're gonna need it. The best advice I can give is to seek out those permanent health expansions. They make the game's challenge a bit more bearable. Once you get to the end and fight Warhead, you'll find that he's actually on top of a tornado, which doesn't make much sense, but it sure looks cool. You have to be careful to stay on these rooftops while jumping to shoot Warhead's, head. As you do damage to him, more of the bomb will break away, and this probably freaked out some kids at the time. I mean, even now, watching this guy's head slowly become more and more disfigured doesn't sit right with me. After enough damage, Warhead explodes and Vectorman celebrates, having made the Earth safe for the humans' return. We even get the enemy rundown in the credits. I miss when games did this. It added a lot of personality and made me connect more with the characters in the game.
I killed those guys!
Despite its difficulty, Vectorman is still an excellent game, and it really showed what the Genesis was capable of late into the system's life. The impressive graphical effects and tight gameplay are complemented by a soundtrack composed by John Holland. The soundtrack as a whole is pretty good, but unfortunately it's using the GEM sound driver, which is infamous for not sounding great as a whole. With that said, I'd argue that this is one of the best uses of gems out there. The tracks all fit well during gameplay, and although they sound simplistic at first, they grow on you after hearing them a few times. If you're a fan of 90s electronic music, you're sure to like it. Additionally, there exists a remix album composed by Holland himself which features a few select tracks from the game, and these are a huge improvement. If you thought the originals were good, definitely give these a listen. Vectorman on Sega CD, anyone? Although it was overshadowed by the Saturn and PlayStation, Vectorman was still well received by those who played it, and Vectorman himself kind of became the unofficial mascot of the late 16-bit era. The game still sold well enough to become part of Sega's mega hit series, so it was by no means ignored. Sega and Blue Sky had another hit on their hands, but with a new system out and the Genesis fading into the background, what would their next step be?
The point had been proven. The Genesis was capable of pre-rendered graphics. But with the 16-bit era coming to a close and the focus almost entirely on the next generation of consoles by this point, it was time to bring Vectorman over to the Sega Saturn. Or so everyone thought.
Do unto others as others do unto you. New Vectorman 2, only on Sega Genesis.
In 1996, Blue Sky Software released Vectorman 2, and it would remain on the Sega Genesis. If you thought Vectorman 1 was a late release for the Genesis, take a look at its sequel. Vectorman 2 was released in 1996, November 1996.
When this game came out in North America, the Nintendo 64 had already been out for a few months, so it's a wonder this game even came out here at all.
I do want to mention real quick that neither of these games came out in Japan on the Mega Drive at all originally. They jumped ship to the Saturn real quick over there, and it wouldn't be until a lot of the Mega Drive PC collections that Japanese players could finally access these games officially.
Well, maybe they just felt more comfortable sticking with the hardware they knew. Perhaps they thought the graphics of the Genesis could be pushed even further than the first game did. Although it's not part of the in-game graphics, I actually prefer the box art here over the first game. Vectorman looks really cool, and is he shooting at insects?
I thought shooting at robots was the whole point of the series. I guess not, but enough of me staring at the box. Let's start this game up and get some answers here.
Vectorman 2 takes place sometime after the events of the first game. After saving Earth from Warhead's uprising, Vectorman has resumed his routine as a sludge barge pilot. He's heading out into space like normal and just vibing to some music in this honestly impressive animation when his sludge barge is shot down by a random missile. Forced to abandon ship, Vectorman propellers himself back down to Earth's surface. He lands in the outskirts of a mysterious research facility, and almost immediately we encounter the main antagonists of the game, giant mutant insects. I guess they didn't want to do the whole evil robots thing twice in a row, but having giant insects as the enemies comes entirely out of left field. The first game established that we were in a futuristic civilization abandoned by humanity, but populated by Orbots cleaning it up. The sequel throws that all out the window, and now we're traveling through and up against the forces of nature. Despite the change of scenery, the level design continues in the spirit of the first game. Stages still have multiple paths and areas to explore, and those who go out of their way to find everything will be rewarded with items, which now can be found in these cocoons the game calls power sacks. At least we're not destroying CRTs anymore. Graphically, I think the game is better than its predecessor in some ways, especially in the earlier levels. The lighting effects in these swamp stages are genuinely good, and Vectorman himself seems to be a little more detailed this time around. They changed his voice too from the first game. Now he definitely sounds more robotic.
Yeah.
On the other hand though, some stages, especially in the middle third of the game, look extremely bland and the color palette can look oversaturated at times. I wouldn't classify anything as looking terrible though, so while I think the first game looked better overall, this is by no means an ugly looking game. Vectorman can still obtain new weapons from power sacks, but the weapons are a bit different this time. There's a rapid-fire laser, a much longer but slower laser, a pulse beam, and a super laser that bounces off walls. The overkill bomb returns, but thankfully the effect has been toned down and it doesn't flash the screen anymore. Power sacks still flash the screen though, so once again this is a game that might hurt your eyes after a while. You can also get a shield by defeating these guys, and it's near essential to scale the trees in Stage 3. Transformations, however, are handled a bit differently this time. It kind of addresses one of my criticisms from the first game. Transformations are almost entirely stage-specific now. If a stage requires a certain transformation, you'll automatically start with it and it doesn't wear off. On the one hand, we now have stages designed specifically around these power-ups, but on the other hand, having the power-up for the entire stage completely negates the incentive to explore these levels and find the power-ups you'll need. It's one of those one step forward, two steps back kind of deals. There are only 3 transformations that aren't stage-specific, and these are the most unique ones in the game. Instead of turning into a drill or a car, Vectorman can now assume the forms of some of the larger creatures he destroys. A multi-directional scorpion tail, a tick punch that can break through just about anything, and a rhino charge that's great if you just want to barrel through everything without caring. Yeah, it's just those 3 transformations, and they're stuck on a time limit too, so my criticisms from the first game still apply. I think these are a tiny bit better though, since they focus on upgrading Vectorman's offensive abilities versus only being used to access alternate routes. On his quest to take down the insect invasion, Vectorman will travel through a swamp, a fiery volcano, subway tunnels, underground caverns, abandoned factories, and even through a tornado. Didn't we do that already? This tornado level also has its own tornado transformation for some reason. It makes you invincible, but you can't really jump while using it, so half the time you're just waiting for it to wear off so you can get a move on. And if you thought the first game was a little on the nose with its environmental message, this game has a level that's seriously just called Recycle or Die. Really clever, guys. Next we're gonna have a stage called Don't Release Too Many Add-ons or you'll be forced to become a third party for the rest of time. This level also contains a unique transformation that I swear I had no idea was in the game until I got a copy with the manual for this video. Recycle or Die can be completed in less than a minute if you know what you're doing, but go out of your way to explore and you'll find the Fire Ant transformation. Look at this, Vectorman turns all red and he shoots fire. This is cool as heck. Why was this only used in one stage where most players would never see it? And hold on a minute here. Where are all the other Orbots? It was established in the first game that they're all over the planet cleaning it up, so why does Vectorman feel the need to once again handle this by himself? The first game had a reason for why he was alone in his adventure, but this time there's no excuse not to ask for some outside help. Is his radio down? If this is truly a force that threatens the entire planet, it would make more sense to call in more Orbots to have a greater chance of success. We also never see any other Orbots besides Vectorman himself in this entire game, so either these are all areas the Orbots have left behind, or Vectorman is the last of his kind, and those are both pretty upsetting. Bonus games return here, but now they take place between stages rather than needing to be unlocked first with those satellites. These are pretty fun, and they're the main way to earn permanent health upgrades, but they overstay their welcome by several minutes.
I just want to get to the end, but I need the health upgrade first.
Definitely get a turbo controller for these though, your thumb will start hurting fast. Instead of those micro stages from the first game where you'd have to fight a version of Warhead, we now have dedicated boss fights, and these range from cool to just downright weird. A giant two-headed insect makes sense given the context of the game, but now I'm fighting some kind of sentient lava monster, and what on earth is this thing? A hologram computer demon mouth creature? I have no idea what this guy is supposed to be, and it makes the fight with the twin snakes in the cave seem grounded in comparison. Most of these bosses become an absolute joke when you start hitting them with the boost from the double jump. Most of them go down in only a few hits if you time it right, but the main exception to that is the final fight with the Black Widow Queen. It looks hard at first, but it's actually not that bad. Keep moving left and right and only take a few shots at a time at the giant brain on her back. Don't get too close or she'll swat you away. I like how she starts to show visible damage the more you shoot at her. Avoid her projectiles for long enough and she'll explode, and just like that you've beaten Vectorman 2. The ending sucks, even when compared to the first game. Vectorman jumps up on this tower here, he uses the overkill bomb, the screen says victory, and that's it. We don't even get the enemy roll call like the first game, so that's kind of disappointing. Sadly, the ending is not the only criticism I have with Vectorman 2. The game has 22 levels in total, counting the boss fights, which is more than the 16 levels of the first game, but most of them appear as though they were part of one long level that was cut into multiple parts. The game reuses assets like crazy, and you'll travel through areas that look identical to the level you just completed. The game is most guilty of this starting at stage 8, where Vectorman has to roller skate through an abandoned subway tunnel. The level is actually pretty fun, and after that you have to tunnel through these underground areas by shooting through the dirt. Complete this level though, and it's back to roller skating again. And after that, more tunneling, and the themes each repeat a third time after that before you finally get to see something new. I mean sure, the first game was also guilty of reusing level themes, but they were at least spaced out and took place at different times of day. Vectorman 1 never repeated the same level theme twice in a row, but this game repeats each one at least twice before moving on. Towards the end of the game, Vectorman gets a hold of a tank. I don't think this is him turning into a tank because it's clearly bigger than him, so he just has a tank now. The tank actually controls well, and it's pretty fun to shoot through all these insects with infinite ammo, but this is another level that's a two-parter and it feels like it was just one long level originally. John Holland returns to compose the soundtrack once again, and if you like the first game's OST, then you'll probably enjoy this one as well. I don't consider it as strong as the first game's soundtrack, but there's still some pretty good stuff here, especially that final boss theme. No remix soundtrack for this one, unfortunately, but what's here sounds good, and it fits the game well. Despite all my criticisms, Vectorman 2 is still a great game. It's just kind of repetitive in its level structure. I consider the first game superior overall, but if Vectorman 1 is something you enjoy, then you'll probably enjoy the sequel too, since it's basically more of the same, just with giant insects instead of robots.
Despite getting 2 well-received games in just over a year's time, Vectorman never really found any solid footing or media attention in the gaming world, and that's likely because Vectorman's career was sadly over before it even started.
By the time the first game came out, the next generation of consoles was already underway, and it was a lot to ask of players of the time to jump back a generation just to play something they might not even like. Make no mistake, the games are great, but they just came out at a really inopportune time. There were designs made for a third game in the series titled Vectorman Ultra, which would have been on the Sega Saturn, but the project never got off the ground. And when Sega commissioned Pseudo Interactive to develop a 3D Vectorman game for the PS2, it looked like this. And this is not Vectorman. Looks more like Halo than Vectorman, which is probably why this never got very far in development. Is it rude of me to say I'm glad this never came out?
And that is all she wrote for the Vectorman series. 2 games at the very tail end of the Genesis life cycle are all that ever came of this once promising franchise. It's an unfortunate end to a series that really did have a lot of potential. Ever since that bizarre PS2 demo, Sega hasn't really done anything with Vectorman, but they haven't completely forgotten about him. Sega seems to love including both games whenever a new Sega Genesis compilation comes out, which is probably how most younger players got introduced to the character. So although the series is pretty dead now, the games are relatively easy to get a hold of on a variety of platforms.
I stumbled across the first game here in a lot of Genesis games I bought when I was still in high school, and I ended up loving it. I never see anybody talk about it though, which is why I really wanted to feature it here on Retro Rampage. Maybe you'll have a similar reaction if you haven't tried it yet, but either way, I really hope you enjoyed hearing about these two games today.
Most recently, the first game was included on the Sega Genesis Mini, but for those of you who want both games, they're both available in the Sega Genesis Classics collection for the Nintendo Switch, so it's nice to have a version of these games that you can take with you and play anywhere. Ah, who am I kidding?
Real gamers play on the Sega Nomad.
Yeah, I can almost see what I'm doing.